I'm so excited for my daddy's podcast, and it's going to start right now.
Welcome back to the Lessons for Success show. I'm your host, Adam Wardlaw, a middle school science teacher and a high school football coach here in the great state of South Carolina. I just want to thank everybody that's been supporting the show so far. Lessons for Success has now been heard in over 5 countries and over 22 states here in America. Hopefully you've all gained some valuable insight from our guests so far on the show. Remember that new episodes come out every Sunday and the show is available everywhere where podcasts can be found. Keep up with the show on our social media accounts at L4S Show or use the hashtag L4S Show. Again, that's the number 4. You can also send in messages to the show by downloading the Anchor app. Feel free to send in any questions or comments related to the show so it can be featured in future episodes of the podcast.
Daddy, who's the guest on your podcast this week?
This week's guest is John Weaver. Coach Weaver is a high school football coach in Mississippi. Coach Weaver is also co-host of the Culture Classroom podcast, a show dedicated to providing lessons for developing cultures within classrooms and sports teams. In this episode, Coach Weaver discusses the many lessons he learned during his upbringing and how ultimately it takes perseverance to come out on top. You can follow Coach Weaver on Twitter at MRA Coach Weaver, and you can also keep up with the Culture Classroom podcast on Twitter at CultureClass19. Enjoy.
Well, man, Adam, thanks for having me on. Very humbling to be on your show, Lessons for Success. A lot of times, we're in this coaching profession and we want to have success, and success is typically measured by wins and losses. But I like to think out a different way. It's who we influence and those young people that we coach every day and the ones that we have at home with our children and our wives. Those are the ones that you're influencing every day. So for me, my name's John Weaver. I'm the wide receiver coach for Madison Ridgeland Academy, which is in Madison, Mississippi. I'm also the head varsity boys track coach. And I teach government, and now I teach health. I was just informed that I'm teaching health as well. So it's fun. I love it. I knew in 8th grade that I wanted to be a coach. And my grandfather was an engineer, and he was like, "You need to be an environmental engineer." And I was like, what does that even mean? And now when I told them that I really wanted to be a coach, I had a coach that had a big influence on my life. And I was like, this is kind of what I want to do. Their first initial thought was like, you're not going to make any money. And at 13 years old, I could really care less because my parents provided the house and the food and the gas and everything. So I really didn't worry about what the money situation was. But there's a lot of times in life where you got to do what's best for you and what God calls you to do. And that's where I am today. So I've been 15 years in. I spent 1 year at Delta State University in Cleveland, Mississippi as a graduate assistant. The rest have been in high school and loved every minute of it. So a little bit of background on me is I'm from Vicksburg, Mississippi. And that's big in the sense of the Civil War, if you're familiar with that, the siege of Vicksburg. So a lot of people are like, oh, you Civil War town. I was like, yeah, that's it. So moved around twice when my dad was in the military. So we moved. And I was actually in the band in 6th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, and stuff like that. So I was like, I'm gonna be in the band. I'm gonna do this. I was like 5'4", $120. Didn't even know what a football was like, what it looked like, or anything like that. I just remembered that when we played in the backyard, they told me if I got hit by the ball, that means I caught it to run. So I'd get hit a lot with the ball. But I grew up, and funny story is. We moved back to Vicksburg. We lived in Jackson. They moved back to Vicksburg, and I was going into 7th grade, and I was playing the trumpet. We had moved, going to 8th grade, and the bus is coming to pick me up. And I walk up our driveway, and I have the trumpet case in my hand, and it's like I'm at a crossroad. I was like, do I leave this past behind? Because I grew to like 5'10", $150 over a summer and a half, which was incredible. And I came at a crossroad, and I was like, am I going to leave this trumpet here and go sign up for athletics and my parents not know about it? Or am I going to just go still be in the band? Well, that crossroad came, bus 92-8 stopped, and I dropped the cornet at the driveway and got on the bus, and the rest is history. So I played high school football at Warren Central, played college ball at Hines Community College, and then at Delta State I was a punter, and then tried out for the Falcons in 05. And people were like, how'd that go? And I was like, I'm a high school football coach. That's how that went. So, it's a great thing. I love what I do. It's not always been a clear path for success. So when I got in my coaching career, my first job was a librarian, and I'd moved around a lot after college. I worked for the Gulf South Conference in Birmingham. It's like the SEC at Division II. And then I moved to New York. Then I moved to Athens, Georgia. And then I moved back to Birmingham. And then my grandfather was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to move back home. And all that time I was doing like communication stuff and coaching on the side a little bit at like Spain Park, like doing some odd end volunteer coach, filling that void of, I knew I wanted to be a coach, but I got to get into it. And I moved back, and Porter's Chapel Academy in Vicksburg gave my first job. I was a defensive back coach, and I was a librarian. How about that? I was a librarian. So I did like the elementary book fairs and all that stuff. Here I am coaching football and doing that. So they're like, hey, we'll pay you an extra $1,000 for this. And I was like, look, any money is good if I'm doing what I'm loving. And so I go there. I'm there for a year. I go to another school. End up going to another school, like climbing the ladder. When you do a good job, people want to do another place. So I go. Well, I get to a certain spot, and the school paid for my master's degree, like helped me out with that. And at the end of it, they're like, hey, we're just going to help you with that. So we're not going to have you back next year. We do what we said we're going to do. We don't have enough money to keep you here or whatever. And I was like, oh, man. So here I am. I knew I had to make money. I knew I had to do something. And you talk about trusting in the Lord. I worked at Tower Loan for 2 days. So basically I would solicit money to people that would never pay it back. But I was supposed to call people and say, hey, you qualify for $1,500 when they have like $7,000 worth of debt still that they're never going to pay us back. And after 2 days, I just kind of did a mirror test, and I said, this isn't happening. Like, this is not what's planned out. I knew in 8th grade that I wanted to coach, and I know this is not the path. And it was a lot of prayer of like, God, you got to show me the way. I don't know if there's a trial you're putting me through, a test of like seeing if I really wanted to coach, or my grandfather really wanted me to be an environmental engineer. I don't know. So a school called me. So I quit that Tuesday. It was on a Tuesday. I had no idea what I was going to do. And the girl I was dating at the time is now my wife. And she was like, so what are you doing? I was like, I don't have a job. I have a degree. I have a master's degree, but I have no job. And 4 days later, I get a call from a guy that I used to coach his son at Porter's Chapel my very first year. He's like, hey, Tallulah Academy in Louisiana needs a job. They need a defensive coordinator. Are you available? And I was like, yes. When can I be there? He goes, well, look, take your time over the weekend, get your stuff together, come meet with our head of school on Monday, and then our board on that afternoon. So I drove down there, had all my stuff, drove down, met with him at 9 a.m., met with the board at 11. I had lunch at 1, and I was on the practice field at 2:30. So I was there for 2 years. One is the defense coordinator, one is the head coach. I go back to Porter's Chapel to be their head coach. And you're probably thinking like, this guy's moved around a lot. Well, I have to set me up to where I'm at the best school in Mississippi, in my opinion, is Madison Ridgeland Academy. I've been here going on 9 years. Was the OC for 3 years under a previous head coach. I was the head junior high coach for 4 years under the present head coach of Herbert Davis. And now I'm my second year back in with the varsity staff as a wide receiver coach. And we've done some good things. And then I'm starting my 9th year as well as the head boys track coach. So it's it's a fun ride, but to be in this profession, you got a lot of ebbs and flows, a lot of hills, a lot of valleys, and then sometimes there's mountain peaks, and then other times there's big drop offs. So you just got to ride the wave and see what happens. But it's been work for me. It's worked for me. I surrounded myself with people that were better than me, and the fact that they've been around places, they've seen more stuff, and I was just, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, to listen more than we talk, and that's what kind of helped me get to where I am today, and being at MRA.
Coach, something that stuck out. I mean, you mentioned it, just kind of the moves you had to do, and maybe the jobs that you had to do that were totally, in some cases not connected to football at all. I teach a lot of students, and I know a lot of people who, their dream is this. They're extremely passionate about this, and they just, a lot of people just assume. I know I did. They assume whenever I get done with high school, or whenever I get done with college, I'm going to jump right in and have this job. And it's hard to believe, but that's not always the case. And so I think your story and some of the things you had to go through is a great testament to, if you just keep pursuing what you're passionate about, and just trusting that there is a plan in place, that, eventually the path might lead to what that original passion was. But I do have to ask, I can't imagine some of those spots were always too kind, and those were maybe some difficult times where you weren't necessarily doing what you were extremely passionate about. Was there anything you kind of had to rely on just to kind of persevere through those moments where you didn't necessarily know where your career path was going or anything like that?
Yeah, there was a lot of times I would call my dad. I would call sometimes I would just call Coach Rick Graham, who was our track coach, my pole vaulting coach when I was in college. In high school, and then helped me get into college and run track and play football as well. But I asked him, I was like, what did you have to do? Like, I asked him some hard questions, like, when did you know that this step is going to slide into this step, and then it's going to go up 4 notches and down 2 notches, and then up 4 notches more, and then down 7. And there was a lot of times that I was at a point where, Adam, I would question myself. Is this really what I'm supposed to do? And the answer is you got to have dreams, and you got to have goals. And I learned that at a young age. I say young. At 22, I learned about dreams and goals. How I had a dream to play in the NFL, but it ended up really being a goal, because dreams you control, goals have outside influences. Like our team's goal this year in football is to win a state championship. Well, there's outside factors. There are other teams that we have to play. There's the schedule that we have to go through. There's other people on other teams. So there's outside factors. There's referees. So I like to live now in dreams, and you can control those dreams. Now, if they come to true or not, it's up to you. But for me, it was a lot of times, like being the librarian. I promise you, the times I would have downtime, I would search on the computer about, hey, what can I do to set up myself for job X or job Y or job Z? So as I was updating my resume, I would call other coaches, and just kind of lean on other people and be 2 ears to that 1 mouth of them talking, and me listening to some of their stories that they went through. Because there was some hard times. When I worked at Tower Loan, it was rough. For those 2 days, the guy was like, you got to wear a suit and tie. I was like, what? I'm in the middle of the Mississippi Delta. Like, why do I have to wear a suit and tie? And then he was like, hey, we have to stay here until 7 o'clock. I was like, are you kidding me? And I just had a realization, like, this is not what I want to do. And, thank God for the guy calling me and saying that Tallulah needed a defensive coordinator. So it's just for people that are listening, I guess the best thing and the best advice I could give is, you gotta take with the good with the bad, obviously, but there comes a point where you got to recognize there's different steps, and God has stuff in our plan that we have no idea what's going on, but it's setting up stuff that happens later on in life. So funny story, I looked up MRA a lot on the computer in the library. And one of my players would come in. He's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Man, I'm looking at different schools, like trying to see what requirements they have, if I have this, if I have that." And next thing you know, there it is. And here I am at MRA. And that's, oh man, 7 years returned. I mean, here I am at the school that I searched for on the internet.
That's crazy how it all works out. You know, now that you're kind of in this position, this, you know, dream position that you're in, and you're able to kind of have this influence on your players and your students, you know, how do you approach that role, knowing what you know now? You know, if you're like me and your students are like mine, you hear all kinds of dream jobs and stuff like this. You know, whether or not I personally think a kid can achieve those, like I have to, you know, offer my advice to that kid, you know, unbiased or anything like that. How do you approach that now that you're in this role?
That's a great question. One thing, I'm real with them, and I think you have to be honest. And I tell them, and I don't know if a lot of coaches and teachers are scared to share their story, but I think it's powerful that you don't look like you're on an ivory tower or a sage on the stage when you're looking at kids in a classroom or on a team as a coach. Mm-hmm. That you haven't always been, for me, 38 years old. You've been in their shoes. You understand. I wouldn't say the social media distractions, because I didn't get a phone until my sophomore year in college, and the coolest game on there was Snake. But you know, the kids need to see that there are struggles in this life and how to overcome those struggles. But yet, with struggles, there comes success. And if you persevere through it, and that's a lot of what I believe I went through, is perseverance. Of, you didn't get the first answer you wanted, well, then go to the next one. Mm-hmm. You didn't get this answer, well, let's go to the next one. And it's trial by error, and you let those kids see that, you know, and I said this earlier on a previous podcast, that, you know, you're transparent, not translucent. And those kids know that you have feelings, and you're the same way that I was for those people that were telling me stuff, that you're just ears for those kids. Mm-hmm. And you hear them and you listen to their stories, and then you give them the best advice that fits for them. Not necessarily that you understand everything that they're going through, but you're that ear for them to listen to. And you're like, you know, I can remember when I was that age, and you can give them circumstances, but this world, as you know, it is totally different mm-hmm. from when you and I grew up.
Oh yeah.
And just helping them understand that the times are different, but yet the problems are still the same, because how history repeats itself. But I think that's what you do with the youth of today, and the dreams that they have. Because I mean, it's like potluck for them. They kind of invent their own major. Like, it's like underwater Fortnite. What? Like, that's your major? Oh, yeah. So they, you know, it's a buffet for them. So helping them navigate through the tough times of, like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. Well, hey, let's find out what you like. Let's find out what your interests are. And then let's find out who influences you, and start surrounding yourself with people that influence you on stuff the things that you want to do, that stuff that you want to see, so that, you know, it happens. So that's what I do. I think you have to be real with them. And I ask them a lot of the time, I was like, I want you to think of the most powerful impact a person's had on your life, and who's that person? Mm-hmm. And start there. For me, it was my grandfather, and the impact was, you know, he was always there doing stuff, but the impact was, I didn't want to be an environmental engineer, and he shed that light on me real quick. And then think about people who influence you, and then you go back and you think about people who you influence, because whether you know it or not, you're influencing people daily. For good or for bad. So that's kind of where I go with the kids. Mm-hmm. And, you know, being an educator, being in this position, you see them typically more than their parents do. So you got to be real with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with, you know, just everything you said. And, you know, you talk about the influence on others that you may or may not realize you have. I know that you started up your own podcast, and building it around culture, more team specific and stuff. You want to kind of share with the audience what your venture is with your podcast, the Culture Classroom. Do I have it right, Coach?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's right. Look, we've John Torrey and I we're buddies that have never seen each other. Never met him. I'd say I've seen him. I mean, we Skype and hang out or whatever when we record. But I always knew that I had a communications background, and I knew that, I'll just cut to the chase with it, honestly. People have New Year's resolutions, and they last for about 3 weeks. And John Gordon had his one word popularity come about, and I've had one word for 3 years. Well, John Torrey and I met over a graphic. So I make graphics for teams, dirt cheap for like schedules and stuff. Well, he wanted a schedule graphic, and I was talking with him back and forth about what he wanted on it. And then we got to talking, and he was like-minded and about culture and about process and about influence and about leadership and about trust and responsibility of teams. I was like, man, this guy's got it going on. Well, then he wrote a book called More Than the Game. And I was in the process of writing a book called More Than a W, for W being the win. I was like, this guy. And then we both have the name John. I was like, this is getting a little weird. But I had an idea. I spoke at a conference in Dallas, Texas. And one of the ladies there, one of the presenters, was like, hey, you really need to think about doing a podcast. I was like, first, what is a podcast? 2, how would I even start one? 3, who wants to listen to me ramble? And, that's when it hit me. It's like, I need to call up John Torrey and see if he'll do this with me, because we have similar interests. And we started banging around ideas, talking about what we're going to do. Well, his one word and my one word was influence for 2019. I was like, it's getting wild. So, long story short about the Culture Classroom is we are a podcast on SoundCloud and iTunes that provide leadership, relationship, culture development for teams, whether it be death by inches, whether it be stuff that we see that are happening in our own teams that we want to share, or what we're doing with our own teams in general, with our summer speaking series that we do in MRA, the Leadership Academy stuff that we do. But all in all, we're sharers, and we want to share ideas, and the podcast is the best way to reach tons of people across our nation. Now, our podcast is free. I told them, I was like, man, we don't need money for this. Like, they're going to pay me to talk. I don't need that. I mean, I got a full-time job where I influence kids every day. And I'm at a point where we look forward to the next podcast that we do with people, just because we can share information to help others, from all the way from Gallup, New Mexico, to Portland, Oregon, to Knoxville, Tennessee. I mean, there are so many people we've helped. And then I tell people all the time, like, how is it? I was like, man, we clinic every time that we have a podcast. We learn something new about what other coaches are doing. So we're learning just as much as we're facilitating to other people. And it's amazing. I think we're at like 7,500 downloads, which is amazing. Truly blessed. And, we're at Culture Class 19 on Twitter, but it's been a blessing to see how we can reach other people and influence other people that this world needs, because there's so much negativity, Adam, that this sheds a light of positivity for people in their world.
And I totally support it. I was talking to one of the older coaches on our staff this morning. He actually used to be my coach in high school. And he was just kind of going through his high school days, and how they did like a fall boot camp where they drive them off, and it was more military rather than what he was really talking about nowadays. How there's this big shift in player development, and I think that's a great thing, because the word is getting out there that it is important to be trying to mold the people of tomorrow and the citizens of tomorrow. And I just totally support what you guys are doing. Coach, I appreciate you giving me your afternoon here. One thing I try to end the interviews on is, if you've got, your key to success, it could be something we've already mentioned before. If it's not something we've talked about yet, feel free to throw it out there, and maybe we can talk about it a little more real quick. But what would your key to success be for the listening audience out there?
This one's easy. It's perseverance prevails when all else fails. So it's perseverance prevails when all else fails. So you might not be the best, you might not be the fastest, you might not be the smartest, but as long as you keep trying and you're putting your best foot forward and you're being the best version of yourself and you're honest with yourself every day, that good things are going to happen to you as long as you persevere, and that'll take care of itself. So it's not a magic potion. It's just being diligent with the work that you do and how you provide a steady diet of what you're getting every day, whether it be running, jumping, studying, whatever it is. Perseverance prevails when all else fails.
Coach, thank you so much for your time. Good luck to you guys the rest of the summer. Enjoy your dead week next week. Try to get some R&R if you can, and just keep doing what you're doing, because I support you from here in South Carolina, and I've been trying to spread the word about you, 'cause I heard you way back from Run the Power and stuff like that. And so I've been following you for a while. I'm glad we were able to finally connect and be able to talk a couple times now. And hopefully it's something we can keep going down the road.
Yeah, and if anybody needs some information, if you want to reach out to me on Twitter, it's at MRA Coach Weaver. I'm on Instagram as well, and we can share some life stories, some topics, whatever you want to talk about. I'm an open book when it comes to stuff. I just love the power of influence and how just podcasts and friendships and relationships all turn out every day.
Daddy, I'm learning so much from this podcast.
Coach Weaver's story is a great example of how perseverance is a necessity if you want to reach your goals. Let's review this lesson for success. Coach Weaver realized early on that he had a passion for coaching. However, Coach Weaver's path to reaching his career aspirations did not come easy. It took a variety of stops along the way, including stints in communication field as well as time as a librarian, not to mention a 2-day job as an insurance salesman. No matter what your career aspirations are, you should pursue what you are passionate about. Understand, though, that reaching your aspirations could involve you doing a variety of different tasks along the way. Well, that's it for this week's Lesson for Success. Be sure to interact with the show on Twitter and Instagram at L4S Show, mentioning us or using the hashtag L4S Show. Again, that's the number 4. Episodes will also be placed on the YouTube channel Lessons for Success Show. Download the Anchor app in order to send in messages to the show, and your questions and comments could be featured on future episodes. All of the episodes are available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or anywhere else that podcasts can be found, so be sure to like, subscribe, and rate. Thank you again for listening to the Lessons for Success Show podcast.
That's the end of our show. Thank you for listening.